I think interrupting each other is actually a crucial, part of the dynamic of this podcast.
It is.
It's a crucial dynamic of every podcast.
Yeah,
it is.
Because if we don't,
you need a bunch of loud men. You need a bunch of loud men interrupting each other to truly capture the podcast.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I think
it's perfect.
I'm holding a dog the whole time. You may speak over me at will. Okay. Should we start with talk about some real news?
We don't really do that here. I'm a fake news only kind of guy. Get started.
Some real somber news.
Yeah.
A former president of the United States died recently.
Rip Bozo.
At age 100.
Pack watch.
He was just a fucking kid, man.
He was just a fucking kid. He was in the
gone too soon.
Yeah, he was in his prime. Jimmy Carter. America's worst president? No, because America's had presidents Buchanan and Reagan. But is he the worst president if you control for those two outliers? Yes, probably.
He is the only
I don't
president.
think Herbert Hoover gets enough smoke either, though.
Yeah. Herbert Hoover's pretty bad, too.
Right. Is this the only president to live through...
progressive because he made the Depression worse.
Yes.
I caught myself. Yeah. Is he the only president to live through both the Great Depression and the episode 4 of the Hawk Tuah podcast?
Oh, that's hilarious.
Only president so far.
I'm pretty sure throughout his entire life, the Detroit Lions NFL team have won one playoff game, and have just made the playoffs like the second time in 40 years.
Okay.
He saw the Cubs win.
He did see the Cubs win the World Series.
Mm-hmm. Random leap in logic here, but the Calgary Flames game in LA has been canceled because of wildfires in LA.
Yeah. And you know what the Flames are named after? The Marching Through Georgia of William Tecumseh Sherman. That's right.
Wait, really?
They are one of the few NHL teams named after the American Civil War. They used to be called the Atlanta Flames, named after the burning of Atlanta in the 1860s.
That's like the Birmingham Blast.
Yeah. I think they're the only NHL team named after the Confederate States. There's the Columbus Blue Jackets, which are named after the Union troops in the war. But yeah, the Atlanta Flames were named after the burning of Atlanta, and wasn't it a shame that Atlanta got burned since?
Oh my god.
Okay, so let's talk about Jimmy Carter. He was born James Earl Carter Jr. in Plains, Georgia in 1924.
Plains?
Yep. His father was a peanut farmer, and his mother was a nurse at the hospital where he was born, which, fun fact about Jimmy Carter, makes him the first president born in a hospital.
What?
That's how fucking old he was.
Holy.
That's wild.
Everyone else is born in the hog shed out back.
They were born in the sticks, man. This guy was literally he's from the sticks, but I guess he managed to be born in the hospital.
So before the 1910s and 20s, most people were just born at home. You would have a doctor come. Yeah.
Right.
Doctor house visits used to be way more common.
Dr. House?
So he was a younger son of a large family, so he wasn't really set up to take over the family business of peanut farming, as it were. Instead, he got really into the military. He was a big JROTC and ROTC guy, if you know what those are.
Classic path for a second son.
Yeah. Those are a club they have in American high schools and American universities, where you are basically being fast-tracked into an officer position in the army.
You're being groomed into the military.
Yeah.
It really does lead to one of the most spectacular, high school stereotype scenes that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I remember back in the day watching just JROTC guys on the first date and stuff like that. There were so many great videos.
Yeah, ROTC guys have a reputation for being a bit intense and crazy. And very right-wing.
Yeah.
He had ambitions to become a naval officer, which was a bit unusual for a guy who was born in inland Georgia to a farmer. And he ended up in active service right after World War II ended, serving from 1946 to 1961 in the Silent Service. That's right. He was a nuclear submariner, which is actually a pretty cool job to have. He technically received the World War II Victory Medal, which was awarded to World War II veterans, because he entered service before December 31st, 1946. About a year and a half after the war actually ended.
Participation medal.
Yeah, literally a participation trophy for World War II.
Not even
Jimmy
like,
Carter was the first participation trophy president.
Yes. The
not
first
even like the people who are running food or like I don't know, like, doing random stuff. Like this guy just joined after Hitler killed himself.
Yeah. This guy joined after Japan had been nuked twice.
Yeah.
And they still gave him the medal. So you start in his 15 years of service, he went from the lowest rank in the Navy to the second lowest rank, graduating, receiving an honorable discharge in 1961 at the rank of lieutenant.
No, see, that's how like a proper military works, because if this was like the Israeli occupation forces, that guy would have already been like a major general or a fucking marshal by the time he left his service.
Yeah.
Rank up! Sergeant of the Master Sergeants, most important person of extreme sergeants, to the max!
Okay, so his father was a peanut farmer, and he died in around the time Carter was discharged from the Army, or from the Navy, rather, and the farm was split up amongst the various sons, so Carter went home with his wife to be a peanut farmer for a couple of years. By all accounts, he was moderately successful at it. And in 1963, he decided to run for Georgia senator. He immediately gained a reputation for being inordinately progressive for a Georgia Democrat. He opposed literacy tests, segregation, and the institution of compulsory religious practices in public offices, which was unusually progressive for someone in Georgia in the 1960s. In 1966,
Jimmy Carter setting up a statue of Baphomet in the Georgia state.
In 1966, he had a reputation as a progressive and ran for governor of the state of Georgia, but was defeated because progressive politics was not actually popular in Georgia as much as the Democratic Party was, which he was a member of, which is why he became a senator in the first place.
I am blanking. When was the party flip again?
The party flip was like a gradual process that happened throughout the 1960s.
Okay,
It's also
so
like
we are around that
yeah,
era.
it's also sort of a controversial. Like the idea of it actually having happened is a bit controversial, because you wouldn't say like Hoover is left of FDR.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, I believe in it, which means it happened.
The party flip was mostly around race politics,
Yeah.
and it would have happened around this time.
Okay.
So in 1966, he ran for governor with his progressive reputation and lost. So in 1970, during the next gubernatorial race, he reinvented himself as a hardline racist.
I've changed my life around.
Look.
He's in his George Wallace arc.
That literally, he was in his George Wallace arc. He flirted with joining the segregationist party that George Wallace set up.
Nice.
Promised to invite George Wallace to Georgia to give speeches like to the Senate or legislature of Georgia.
Didn't George Wallace say he regretted saying some of the things?
Yes. George Wallace was the last third-party candidate to win states in an election, and he won most of the Deep South off of a restoring segregation platform.
That's where the quote, segregation now, segregation tomorrow. Yeah.
Exactly.
And segregation forever.
Exactly. That was that guy. His senior campaign aides handed out a photograph of his more liberal rival celebrating with a black basketball team, which ended up swinging the election to Carter.
him?
Yeah.
No way. This is Shane Gillis's football take.
Once actually in as governor, after having ran on an extremely far-right race-baiting campaign, he flip-flopped on race again, alienating his own supporters by stating in his inaugural address, "The time for racial discrimination is over," and immediately implemented the Georgia Human Rights Commission. So, which is I think this is the peak of his career.
Yeah.
This is actually a pretty funny move.
So do we have
This
like...
is like proper political trolling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You run on like the most racist campaign or second year inaugurated, Just kidding, guys. And you're already in, so there's nothing they can do for like 4 years.
Here's a question I'm not sure if you have the answer to. Do we have like personal diaries where we can tell what he actually thought? Or was this guy genuinely just getting like auto-balanced as history went on?
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, we have biographies of him, but I didn't actually read any of them.
Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
I
You
mean,
have to check the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library.
Yeah.
oh. I feel like a autobiography of Jimmy Carter is the exact place I would expect to get no information about the real life of Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
No, most of the sources for this are
Carter
secondary
President's
sources.
Library staffed by descendants of George Wallace.
Rather
Didn't
than,
he have a bunch of anti-Zionist books?
we're gonna get into that.
Oh, okay.
This is part of his long, crazy career.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Especially post-presidency.
I got too cocky.
He blew his load too early.
So he was governor from 70 to 74 in Georgia. Meanwhile, things in the United States were not going great. The Nixon presidency was collapsing in the wake of Watergate, which broke in 1973, when it was revealed that Nixon had essentially cheated in the 1972 election. The disintegration...
Let a guy live.
Yeah. Honestly, agree. I mean, if you look at the results of the 72 election, I think he won that shit fair and square. It was like 49 states to 1.
Yeah, that guy...
Paranoid freak that he still had to cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nixon's resignation, cratering public confidence in the military and the Vietnam War, which was winding down, and the straw that broke the camel's back in public confidence in the American government was the 1973 oil crisis, when the oil-producing, newly decolonized countries of the Middle East realized they controlled the world economy and decided to flex that muscle. From October 1973 to March 1974, oil production and export was cut off from the Middle East and North Africa. Mostly officially in protest of Israel's conduct in Palestine.
Yeah.
So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Although, I mean, now they wouldn't even do that shit.
Yeah.
No.
Despite escalating circumstances.
The economic effect of the oil crisis was absolutely insane because this was before renewables, right? So everything was running on oil. Plastic is made of oil, cars are running on oil. Basically all energy production is oil
Was
based.
Marco Pierre White already running on oil?
Huge moment for coal.
Yeah. Global economic production collapsed everywhere.
Yeah.
In the Eastern Bloc and the West. This was not great for anybody. And it led to a phenomenon called stagflation, where the dollar continued to inflate, but growth stopped. So, this is a bad combo.
Do not look at the current state of things, by the way.
The oil crisis exacerbated a problem that was already happening. Growth had been slowing down following the end of the baby boom and a come down from the initial bump in the American economy saw from the Great Society programs of LBJ, which was a massive expansion of the American welfare state. But the oil crisis made the slight economic downturn of the early 1970s turn into a potential Great Depression level threat. So something needed to change, and Jimmy Carter was the guy promising to change things. In the 1976 election, he promised to transform the way the government approached the economy, while remaining a progressive Democrat. So he basically was the first fiscally conservative, socially liberal type of guy.
Right.
He wanted
The first neoliberal.
Yeah. I was gonna say, because, like, a lot of people I know say that, like, neoliberalism was officially baked in like, 82. But I feel like this is a pretty convincing argument for at least, like, even if it wasn't baked in, it was at least, like, spawned and in motion in 73.
Yeah,
which is why you have the websites like whathappenedin1970.com, where it shows, like, or is that, close enough to that? Which is just shows every single graph of, like, wages being tied to productivity, which then, like, separates where wages stay the same, real wages stay the same, and productivity keeps growing after 1970. And there's a ton of other statistics that just show ever since 1970 or the early 1970s, workers have just been decimated.
Well, So the unions and the government were still had a pretty sizable impact on the American economy by 1976. But the stagflation was what was starting to uncouple productivity from wages, basically.
Yeah.
For real wages, rather. And Carter was promising to change that. He promised to reform welfare, cut social spending, and lower taxes for the lower and middle class while increasing them for the upper classes, and was the first Democrat to promise to balance the budget in half a century. He also flip-flopped on race again.
No way, bro.
In order to...
This man is like flopping around like a fucking fish.
Yeah.
what was around the first time he flopped? What
So he was initially a progressive.
Yeah.
Then he ran a super racist campaign.
Right.
Then he governed as a progressive.
And
then now he's flip-flopping again.
What year is this that he's flopping?
76.
When he's running for president.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So having secured the Democratic ticket as a progressive, he flip-flops on race again, saying that he has nothing against a community that is trying to maintain the ethnic purity of their neighborhood.
Jesus Christ.
And
holy shit.
Claims
Kindred spirit lead
and claims to oppose government efforts to, quote, inject black families into a white neighborhood just to create some sort of integration. Mm-hmm. So
this is the busing thing?
This was
yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
this was busing, which was like
Yeah.
it like buck broke a lot of like American whites.
Carter
has that okay? I just
buck,
want to
but brain
interrupt
broke.
there. Has that thing? Yeah, buck breaking. Okay, one, we should absolutely do a podcast review of Tariq Nasheed's buck breaking.
Right, I
The
forgot
only
he did
thing I
that.
remember of this was watching it briefly and saying, I wonder how long it's going to be until I see like a black male teenager twerking, and it immediately cut to a black male teenager twerking. Where was I going again? I got distracted. Oh yeah, the whole like busing and like doing all. This is something that I haven't really looked up, but I've just caught tailwind of talking to two people, so I might just be wrong here. But the whole like just effectively like sending black people to different cities and stuff like that and having them set up shop, I thought that was something that we like have seen historically just did not work out for them.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Wait.
think about it,
That's not really
But
what
I'm not
busing
sure what
was.
happened.
Busing
But
was.
busing was when you had sort of underserviced schools in poor black neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And
Bus them to richer white neighborhoods
Yeah.
to go to school there.
yeah, you
Yeah.
weren't moving
Oh,
black
just to go to
parents
school.
Yeah.
fucking
Okay.
hated that.
I
And,
thought
like,
we were talking about just sending them to
No,
live in
they
different
weren't. This wasn't like
communities.
a Stalinist style relocation. It was like
It would have been so much better if it was.
Yeah.
it was like it was bringing poorer black kids into richer white schools so they would have a higher quality of education.
and
Yeah.
it was
Deport
just.
white suburbanites to the inner city.
It actually would have been better if they moved, because it was just like you go there for the day and then you come back home, right?
Also, you'll see like white liberals swear on their lives that you also saw like white students from the suburbs bus to like
To black areas.
underserviced inner city neighborhoods, and also that black parents hated it as much as white parents, which is like something like I know these two arguments because my dad has said them.
Look, you have to
And
understand.
it's like, this is not true.
The only white guy to get shipped to an inner city, Christ, gotta catch myself here, to get shipped to like a black neighborhood for schooling was Zizek, and that's how he got his first 4 N-word passes.
Right. So once in office, Carter surrounded himself with the early neoliberals, more or less, and became convinced that saving the stagflating American economy required a radical regime of deregulation and strike breaking.
Of course.
He set about deregulating as soon as he was in office every industry he could get his hands on, especially freight and energy. In 1978, he abolished the Civil Aeronautics Board, which was a regulatory agency focused on keeping consumer prices for flights low. This was the first federal regulatory agency to be destroyed since the Hoover administration. He withdrew government intervention in trucking, abolishing most restrictions on rates, route lengths, and pay. He deregulated train safety rules. He deregulated fossil fuel production and environmental protections. He deregulated worker protections in the energy and mining industries. Basically, he was just abolishing any rule he could get his hands
That's
on.
wild.
Yeah.
So you can blame this guy for
I mean, it was a real anarchist.
Everything
East
bad in your life.
Palestine, the train derailments.
Yes,
in
exactly.
Palestine, the fact that Amazon drivers have to piss in water bottles.
Yes,
The fact that the freight trucking industry has people stick with their jobs in that industry for about a year on average.
Right.
Yeah.
Turnover
No,
rates
when
of
I learned all about the trucker stuff, like that was when I realized that this is probably, from what I've seen, the most overrated president in history. Like, I've seen so much Jimmy Carter glazing because he is like 96 years old. Well, was. I mean,
100 years old.
Yeah, pack watch. But he was like 95 years old and still like building houses with his own hands.
Well,
and everyone's like, oh, well, I love this
really
guy.
building those houses because he was like in a wheelchair by that time.
I don't know, man.
He looks like he
I
can
don't
barely
know.
even lift a hammer.
Look,
Are you
know,
being
it's-
ableist?
It's such a because I hear
I'm being
this thing-
ageist, actually.
there's such a discrepancy on like how I don't know active he was because we see the guy in a wheelchair. We saw him quote unquote vote for Kamala Harris, which was voter fraud if you ask me.
His hands dead people vote.
And like they're like, yeah, this guy builds houses with his own hands. He shakes everyone's hand in the play. I'm like, does he really? He looks like he can barely breathe. Like what?
you have to understand that the Democratic Party has a.
Joe and Joe Biden, where him.
Wait, he
and
looks
his
like a
wife-
miniature version of
They look like
himself.
fucking hobbits.
Yeah. The Democratic Party especially is like they got a great track record with wheeling corpses out to do their bidding.
Yeah.
Like what was the fucking girl? You know who I'm talking about.
Nancy Reagan?
Dianne Feinstein.
Diane
Yeah.
Feinstein,
Literally,
She was
like
92. She
I'm-
didn't know where she was.
I'm not
Her
convinced she
staffers
had
were
a
like-
heartbeat.
Like literally, her staffers would like wheel her into the Senate chamber and say, "Vote yes on this bill."
Yeah.
That's wild.
She just did not know where she was. And at that point, they were just like keeping her alive with some fucking dark magic, like Warhammer 40k.
Yeah.
There was
Also, we all know now they've officially released that Biden could not make decisions.
Yeah,
And it was literal
since
deep state shit.
2021.
Yeah.
The year he got into office.
Yeah.
Wait, what happened with this? What happened?
No, they released a thing just saying like the Democratic Party was just like they knew that Biden could not make decisions for like the entirety of his presidency,
Yeah.
more or less, and then they ran him again. They wheeled his corpse out for one more battle.
There was like an article talking about how in 2021, the year he took office, he was already like canceling meetings if he wasn't feeling up to them, if he was having an off day.
Wow.
Like-
Like you can have an off day as a president of the U.S. and when I
Honestly, good for him. I wish I could just cancel meetings
Self-care
if I didn't want to.
I mean-
It's like a self-care day.
it would have been so funny if he said that. Take a little self-care day. Treat yourself.
Honestly,
Treatler.
a little treatlerite.
Okay.
It has been 0 minutes since Liam has been on the show calling someone Hitler.
Wouldn't it be so funny if Biden died before his presidency ended?
Holy shit, actually. Yeah.
Well, there's the Tecumseh
the
curse, right?
Tenskwatawa curse,
Yeah.
where what was that?
It's like if it's the 20th anniversary of Tecumseh's death and you like get elected or something,
Yeah.
you die immediately after you lose presidency.
yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
it's a little esoteric for me to really know, especially as the guy that doesn't know anything.
So he deregulated all this stuff, slashed worker protections in an effort to save the American economy, which is very much like that SpongeBob clip where SpongeBob and Patrick are in
did it,
Bikini
Patrick.
Bottom,
We
and they're
saved
like,
it.
"We did it! We saved the city!" And it's all burning to the ground. The labor movement, which was still powerful in the U.S. at this time, didn't take as obvious attacks on the New Deal lying down.
Yeah.
So there were strikes by the United Mine Workers, the United Auto Workers, and the Teamsters throughout his presidency, and he replied each time by crushing and disempowering private sector unions basically for good, with repeated invocations of the Taft-Hartley Act, which allowed him to intervene in each of these strikes and bust them up.
Do not look at what is going on with strikes in Canada right now.
With private sector unions basically put on life support in his later presidency, and deregulation in full effect, stagflation started to slow down by 1979. But old Jimmy can't catch a break. Because in 1979, the Iranian pro-Western government is overthrown by a coalition of rebels, and oil production in the country falls by 75%. As a major...
where the last crisis was just kind of doing a little bit of trolling,
Yeah.
it seems like this one actually was a real crisis, question mark?
Yeah, there was a lot of infrastructure was damaged during the Civil War.
It wasn't really a civil war, but there was pretty much immediately a war with Iraq.
Yes, yes, the Iran-Iraq War made things even worse. But overall, oil crisis again.
Yeah.
Global oil production cratered again, and now Jimmy was out of things to deregulate and out of unions to bust. So,
It's got to get more creative.
Told Americans they
We
have to wear
found
sweaters indoors.
we have found so many great things to deregulate and destroy since this guy. He really had to just open his brain a bit.
So stagflation resumed, and Carter was now out of stuff to do. Enter the Volcker shock. Carter's economic transformation plan is nearly complete. He swaps the Federal Reserve Chief from William Miller, who's just some empty suit guy, to Paul Volcker, who is a staunch neoliberal ideologue who was willing to help Carter make the switch from an official Keynesian economic system to a neoliberal one for good.
I spoke
what
too
was,
soon.
what
He
was-
did get creative.
What was Volcker's school that he studied at?
It was
Or I
probably
guess-
it's going to be Chicago. I don't know, but if I had to bet money,
Volcker could have.
it was the London School of Economics.
Okay, just as bad. Evil school.
Isn't that where Ricky Wolf is these days?
Richard Wolff?
Yeah.
I don't
Is he?
know.
I don't know.
All right. Whatever.
So
I call it evil for personal reasons.
Oh, that's
Everyone
fair.
who's
That's
here knows
fair.
why.
Yeah.
So-
yeah.
the Keynesian approach to managing inflation and unemployment as things that are balanced against each other is to favor unemployment to keep inflation down.
Yeah.
Uh,
Basically maintaining the reserve army of labor.
yes,
Yeah.
the neoliberal solution to inflation is to increase unemployment because that decreases consumption. The Keynesian approach to inflation was to bring unemployment down and try to institute a full employment regime to fix the economy.
I also want to point out just one thing, which is that under neoliberalism,
Ditches.
the overall approach to inflation is to keep it at like 2%, which is very small, but like, yeah, it's very small. You don't really notice anything year to year, but over time it still kind of encourages you to invest in all of that. But what is considered low inflation is up to like 10% or like 7% broadly speaking is still considered low inflation
That's, like, still,
around
like-
the world. And there's a lot of discussion going on right now, even amongst capitalists, all right, which is saying like, is 2% like a terrible target? Because it does stop prices from raising quickly, but does it stifle growth like we've seen in the neoliberal era? Is that 2% target stifling growth as opposed to allowing slightly more, 5 to 7%, which would increase prices faster, but also people would, like, one, notice more, so they would demand better wages, and two, it might increase production faster.
Right.
So that's out of the way.
So, inflation reached 16% year over year by the time the Volcker shock was instituted, and unemployment by that point was around 7 to 8%. After the Volcker shock, which was the combined selling off of government assets, cutting of government spending, and massive increase in the interest rates to discourage investment, unemployment more than doubled.
This is Volker's plan?
Yes.
That's interesting.
From
Okay.
8
With a name like Volkers, it's what I expect.
Honestly, yeah, I wasn't gonna say it.
Yeah.
Very Teutonic sounding name.
The effect of,
Prussian, very National Socialist.
Yeah.
the effect of the selling off of state assets, slashing of spending, and increase in interest rates was an unemployment rate doubling from 8% to almost 20% and climbing.
That is literally Great Depression.
Oh,
unemployment.
shit.
Within a year.
So, okay, this is, yeah, it's literally, I mean, we know it's shock doctrine because of what it is, but also it's, like, Yeah, it's just shock doctrine in every way.
The American manufacturing economy cratered across the entire country, but especially the Midwest as consumption declined and never recovered. This is when the Steel Belt became the Rust Belt, as factories were shut down en masse
Holy
and
shit.
millions of people were laid off.
Those poor souls, at one point, they were the Time Magazine Person of the Year.
Now, keep in mind, the amount of people employed in the Steel Belt before Carter and Volcker turned it into the Rust Belt was so massive, and this is one of my favorite Rust Belt factoids. The city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, produced more steel per year than the entire Axis powers combined every year of World War II.
Holy shit.
So the collapse of the Steel Belt is a big problem.
Yeah,
And unemployment is rising basically day by day, and is only stemmed by them sort of tweaking how unemployment is measured.
I had a side question.
Yeah.
Do you know the steel production stats of Gary, Indiana?
Oh, baby.
Gary, Indiana fell even further than Pittsburgh. Like, Pittsburgh has managed to economically recover. Gary, Indiana is like year over year for the past 20 years worst place to live in America.
Yeah, Gary, Indiana might, like, it. That is a story
And
that
literally
is
Magneto
absolutely
Gorsk at one
terrible.
point was like modeled on Gary.
Gary, Indiana's steel employment fell by 90%.
Yeah. I think Freddie Gibbs's output alone is like 90% of their GDP right now.
You want me to play it on
Yes,
my phone?
I do. Yes, I do. I need it.
Yeah, you sent it to me on Instagram. Let me pull
Yeah.
this up. I gotta scroll past the Dr. Umar clips. You
Oh, Michael Jackson was also from Gary. Indiana.
Michael Jackson was from Gary?
Yeah.
How did I not know this? All right, I thought the most famous.
Literally.
Miserable.
I thought Gary's I thought the peak of what they had was Freddie
Freddie
Gibbs.
Gibbs.
And no disrespect to Freddie Gibbs, honestly one of my greatest rappers of all time, but the Jacksons being from Gary, I hate to break it to you, my brother, there is one above.
Even he would agree with that.
Yeah.
So
That's hilarious. That must be us.
Oh, nigga, give me one more gram. Tell me that dope. Oh, please. Tell me that dope. Oh, nigga, give me one more gram.
So, the American workers were fucked over because now so many of them are unemployed that what few private sector unions are still limping around are basically completely destroyed because there are so many people desperate for work that it's very much a employer's market. Right. So even people who have jobs, their wages are going down. Destroying the American working class wasn't bad enough. The Volcker shock had a compounding effect on the world economy at large due to the rapid increase in interest rates. Because the U.S. had sort of cemented itself as the core of the Western economy, and by the West I'm including a lot of the third world too, like Latin America. A lot of
They strangely allied with the West for unforeseen circumstances.
A lot of over-leveraged Western and Latin American economies basically completely collapsed as they had borrowed at a lower interest rate and now owed a shit ton of money. This was a economic crisis that would afflict mostly Central and South America for basically the next 10 years as poverty rapidly rose in the wake of Carter's administration. From 1980 to 1990 almost.
Oh my, so this is where we get 1982 from, isn't it? And it's all making sense. Now I get the rate rise. This is October 2nd, 1982, isn't it? The rates rose.
No, this is actually 1980.
1980?
Because Carter wasn't president in 1982.
Whew, all right. I went a little too far there.
There's foundations being laid.
This is basically the official moment the U.S. stops being sort of a social democracy and becomes just a neoliberal economy. By 1980, things are going so badly in the U.S., and Americans are so fed up with Jimmy Carter that Reagan is able to beat him with the campaign slogan, "Are you better off
than you were 4 years ago. For most people, not just in the US, but from the 49th parallel to the Cape of South America, the answer is fuck no.
Do not look at Polyevra today.
Oh my god.
We're just reliving all of this right now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like, nothing ever... Time is a flat circle, man.
That's what Trump did.
So in
End
his
of history.
In 1980, Carter gets absolutely crushed by Reagan, who comes in and then just keeps doing what Carter was already doing.
Yeah.
And like he did lose a lot of popularity for that too.
Yeah.
Like Jodie Foster changed the course of history, man.
In his post-presidency, this is why most people consider Carter a good person but a bad president. Carter became very progressive, often critical of the very economic regime that he had created, which is very much like...
Literal Dwight Eisenhower.
I was literally about, I have it in the notes, very Eisenhower criticizing the military-industrial complex.
On his way out the door, it's like, by the way, this is bad. Bye, guys.
Eisenhower coming in, making the military-industrial complex and being like, yeah, that was a mistake, but you have to deal with that now. And then leaving.
Bye, guys.
And he became, he got involved in a lot of social activism. He became a Palestine guy. He did loads of charity work.
So on that, Mark, I just want to say, I saw so many things of like, oh, Jimmy Carter published multiple books, and they showed a bunch of covers of his books. It just happened to be missing 2 or 3 of them, which were related to Zionism, Israel, and Palestine, that did not pop up when showing images of his published books after his death.
He did loads of charity work. His most significant post-presidency achievement was helping drive the parasite guinea worm to extinction through his charitable foundations.
This man literally became an ideological Catholic after his presidency.
Yeah, he was
my ticket into heaven. It works.
He seemed. I think his presidency was so evil and bad that he spent the rest of his life with an incredible sense of guilt for what he had done.
Yeah.
Another thing we didn't mention is that, and I know because I've read the Jakarta Method, is that
shout out Jakarta Method.
He was also president doing cover for the right-wing Indonesian military government while they were committing a genocide in East Timor.
Yeah.
Now, Carter is now remembered as one of the worst presidents ever.
Okay, but for us, he absolutely is. Everywhere I look, people seem to like him.
Yeah.
I didn't realize all the shit he was implicated in until, like, fairly recently.
I think
all I knew was the truckers, and that was enough to call him the most overrated president in history for me. And now I, like, just learn everything else, and it's brutal.
Yeah, he was effectively the first neoliberal president.
A lot of selective memory because of, like, he started it, but, like, it reached its heights under Reagan.
Yeah.
Now,
but Reagan couldn't even have won in 1980 if Carter hadn't just completely destroyed the United States.
Yeah.
So here's a question that I'm not sure if we have all the answers to, Sway, but so the Jimmy Carter Foundation and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
This kind of also predates what Bill Clinton did with the Clinton General Initiative and the Bill Clinton Foundation, which is like, it took a lot of like change making and political power and put it into the whims of very specific people. Is this a longer going trend, or did Carter also start that, which is one of the major reasons why people went on to hate Hillary Clinton because of the Bill Clinton Foundation?
I think it was just the Clinton Foundation.
Or sure.
Yeah.
That works.
I don't know.
A very specific question. We don't have the answers, Sway.
I don't have the answer to that question.
You ain't got the answers. You ain't got the answers, Sway.
We'll need to come back to this at a later date with more research.
Yeah, but yeah, I feel like Carter. There's a lot of like reevaluating his presidency right now because he's now dead and because everyone sees him as a good person for what he did in his post-presidency, even though I maintained he probably ruined 10 times as many lives as he saved in his post-presidency.
Yeah. Easily.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I think about 70% of the population of East Timor died when he was president.
Yeah.
When he was, like, basically arming the government that was killing East Timorese.
Yeah. But even the framing of Carter, I think, the memory is that people are like, oh, they know he was a bad president, and they say he was a good person.
That's like
Yeah.
the dichotomy of Carter. But
Like, mayhaps. He spent
Yeah.
44 years of his life trying to do good stuff, but
Yeah.
again, when you balance it out on the
yeah,
general
it's,
scheme of things...
it's not even close.
No.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I will say that you could probably, like, give him credit for at least trying to do something, because compared to, like, almost every other modern president out of power who just does, like, think tank bullshit,
Yeah.
or, like, nature documentaries on Netflix,
Yeah.
or just... I don't know whatever the fuck Trump was up to when he was out of office, except for, like, fighting for his life in legal battles.
Yeah.
He was actually doing
McDonald's.
something, like, more, like, socially proactive with his time, even if, you know, I think his presidency condemns him to hell.
Yeah.
I think, okay, Carter, I think, in his personal life, he sort of did have an outsized conscience,
Yeah.
which is why I think he felt so guilty about his presidency. I mean,
He
one
felt so guilty about, like, even just, like, being horny for women who weren't
Yes,
his
I
wife.
was gonna say in 1976, one scandal for the election was that he admitted to lusting after women who weren't his wife, like in the past, like not cheating on his wife,
Why
being
would you
attracted to
say
other women.
that?
Because he's so fucking Baptist.
Man, you're
This is the
fucking
kind of
human.
hard-hitting journalism.
Oh, you thought about it.
It was
that
in an
right?
interview
Yeah.
with Playboy magazine.
Yes, it
It's
was.
like, is he walking around just going like, thinking, "I'm sorry, man. It was fat. I hate myself." Like, just shut up.
So I think he did. I think
yeah, but
This is
I
like
was
the
gonna say
Calvinist bullshit that American Protestants love, though.
the reason
Yeah.
the reason why a lot of people think Carter was a bad president, I think, is the wrong reason.
Yeah.
And those reasons are the Iranian hostage crisis and the national malaise speech.
Yeah.
Basically, at the height of his economic reforms, he gave a speech on TV that was like, "Yeah, it sucks right now, but
Suck it up.
No
yeah."
one wants to work anymore.
Basically, he did a national "No one wants to work anymore" speech.
Like, I don't know if it was exactly the turn of phrase, but he basically said something to the effect of, you should just wear sweaters indoors
Yeah.
now if you can't get oil to heat your homes.
Yeah, it was basically like the FDR fireside chats, but instead of FDR being like, "I'm gonna fix all of this," Carter's like, "I'm aware I broke it, but you're gonna have to go without heat for a couple of years."
And I think there was a specific, very famously, the winter of 1979 during the second oil crisis was like a very bad one.
Yeah. The national malaise speech, a lot of conservatives criticize it because it's like, how dare you criticize our great country and its great culture, and it just made it was pouring fuel on the fire. The national malaise speech, I think, is one of the funnier, cooler things he did in his
Yeah.
presidency. Yeah.
Flexing on the American people. A very pure Elliot. Well, actually, maybe a pure Elliot Trudeau moment, but with less swag.
The other one was the Iranian hostage crisis, where he basically refused to invade Iran over them sieging the American embassy.
Right.
Now, recently there have been leaks that the Iranian hostage crisis was prolonged actually by the Reagan campaign.
Who'd have thought?
The Reagan campaign staffers were pulling a Nixon. Nixon, in '68, violated the Logan Act by negotiating personally with the North Vietnamese government to prolong the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Reagan basically did the same thing with the Iranians, a country that he would have a sort of a strange relationship throughout his whole presidency.
He was when the Gulf War happened. That was Reagan's.
No,
tenure?
That was Bush Sr.
Bush. Oh, right,
Yeah.
right.
So
I will say that the October, as it's called, the October surprise, has been kind of in the realm of almost conspiracy theory since the 1980 election, and it's still very much up for debate whether this happened or not. But there was someone saying to the effect of one of the conspiracy theories was someone in the Reagan administration was in Madrid at a certain time meeting with Iranian representatives, and someone who knew this guy said at one point, yeah, he was in Madrid at this time. So it's not smoking gun stuff, but more
Shit lines up.
There is
there are dots to connect.
There's dots to connect, but it's still not enough. Just definitively say that, but like
kind of like Trudeau being Castro's son.
Precisely.
The coolest thing about Trudeau would be
There's
if
no
he was
hard
actually
evidence,
Castro's son.
but they're both true.
Yeah. Man, I find it so funny hearing like people going around trying to like rile up schizos by saying that it's an open secret in Canada that Trudeau is Castro's son, but straight up like
talking about one of our listeners.
Yes, I am, and but at the same time,
you know who you are.
I genuinely like I say it as a joke, and but when I think about it, I'm like, yeah, it's probably right. It's probably right. Okay, but back to Slip and Jimmy. I think that like I remember back when I was on Reddit, there were posts that would every now and then show up on the front page that were, I think I talked about this already, like, oh, Jimmy Carter's still out there building houses, and all the comments are like, oh, this guy has always been for the community, like he's great like that. Yeah, we want a president that's like a real person like this that goes out there and gets something done even though he doesn't actually need to.
Yeah.
Nah.
He needs to.
Yeah, fuck this guy, man. He needs to for his soul, yeah.
Yeah, and like Bennett said, it doesn't even match up. Like, bro, you have to destroy the U.S. government if you want to actually, like, make up for the thing you've done. Like, there's no amount of, like...
You need to press the nuclear button to have the nukes drop, your own nukes drop right on the Pentagon.
Yeah, there's no amount of, like, handshaking, house building, like...
Yeah, you gotta become... General Secretary of the Communist Party of the United States and the New Revolution to make up for this shit.
You need to take over from Gus Hall.
Yes.
And finish the work that Earl Browder started.
All right.
Yeah.
Is that our
that's our Carter retrospective, right. The life and crimes of Jimmy Carter.
All right. Thank you for listening, everyone. And
fuck that
bye.
guy.
Yeah, honestly, fuck that guy. Rip Bozo. Packwatch. I think I'll leave this out by playing FBG Duck's Dead Bitches.
I will say this, Jimmy Carter, we do not forgive you.
No. What block you from? Let us know so we can spin it. Make Chicago legend, shit. That was just about business. Said I won't go this to dead, and okay, I did it. But nigga, fuck T-Roy and OD them dead bitches. Nah, for real, fuck them niggas. All my ops, bitch. Heard he mixing brick name. No, he didn't.